international development cooperation is changing. Throughout the 20th century, two approaches became rampant.
Está cambiando. Lo primero de esto fue el modelo tradicional que empezó con el plan para construir la Europa después de la guerra y luego el grupo de asistencia. Este modelo ha dominado el enfoque a través de la ayuda y se imaginó un modelo diferente como la cooperación sur que tiene el vínculo entre Asia y África. El Gran Fondo se estableció para intensificar la cooperación entre India, América, Sudamérica y se crearon estos modelos de manera independiente y que aprenden uno del otro.
The beginnings of a change that would harmonize the two approaches. First, the 1971 pledge that the richest countries commit 0.7% of GNI to the developing nations. Then, the Monterrey Consensus, marking the first multipartite exchange of views between stakeholders in international development. This paved the way for Busan 2011. From that moment, a new inclusive partnership was born, representing the spectrum of stakeholders from citizens and civil society to corporations, ministries and governments. With every actor represented and bringing their history to the table, truly effective cooperation could begin. The 10 indicators of progress agreed at Busan will be viewed through 4 principles. The first 2 of which are country ownership and inclusivity.
We definitely think that development works best when the country, the government and the people in that country are taking the lead and others can support the work that they're trying to do. So country ownership and country leadership is really, really crucial.
Partnerships are important because none of us can do important things alone, not even the UN. We are arguably the most important and comprehensive set of development organizations in the world. Even so, we do need our bilateral partners. We absolutely need national ownership of developing countries. We need the support of civil society. We need the partnership with the private sector. We need to work with academia and think tanks to have fresher and clearer thought leadership. We need to work with the people.
We know that these principles of country ownership and inclusivity work, but we also know that challenge lies ahead in implementing these principles. Yegna is a radio drama which tells the story of 5 friends and is followed by a radio talk show exploring the challenges Ethiopian girls face. Inclusivity in Ethiopia means changing attitudes and allowing women and girls to become real stakeholders in society and players in economic development.
ብዙዎች መናገር እንደሚችሉ ማሳመን ይችላል የኛ ማሳየት ይችላል ብዬ አስባለሁ። የምናነሳቸው ሀሳቦች የተለያዩ ባለስልጣናት ይሰሟቸዋል። እነኛ ባለስልጣናቶች ደግሞ አሃ እንደዚህ ያለ ልክ ነው አዎ እና ስለዚህ ይሄንን ቀይራ ይላሉ ብዬ አምናለሁ። ስለዚህ ለውጥ ሊመጣ ነው በፖሊሲም ደረጃ እንደዛ ደግሞ ስናየው ከሁለቱም አቅጣጫ ለኢትዮጵያ ለውጥ ሆነላት ማለት ነው።
Embodying both inclusivity and country ownership, the Yegna brand was founded by a multi-stakeholder partnership and owned by Ethiopian consortium Yegna Bet.
And I would like people to go one day, oh my God, we have missed out. This is where we should invest. That's what Yegna is.
If every girl in Ethiopia finished education, it would add $500 million to its GDP. Inclusivity increases wealth.
The empirical evidence is very clearly there that increases in gross domestic product, increases in national accounts, all come from a greater participation of women in decisions that affect lives.
The positive economic effects of such inclusive policies are already being exploited by multi-stakeholder partnerships, such as this one between the Republic of Korea, the UNDP, and Colombia. Colombia's Inclusive Economic Development Program has created employment and entrepreneurship centers which generate opportunities for low-income and marginalized populations by providing microcredit, technical assistance, and business counseling.
Se Emprende me orientó, me llevó a Finamérica para la organización de préstamos. Se Emprende ayuda a que uno, mire, arme un plan de negocio. Cuando ya uno arma un plan de negocio, ya uno tiene una visión para un futuro.
Ha sido masivo el interés del gobierno colombiano. Hay 8 funcionando y hay cerca de 10 que están en creación. Si esto ha funcionado en Colombia, nosotros creemos que puede funcionar en otros países del mundo. Creemos que puede efectivamente ser replicado por su costo-eficiencia, porque de inmediato o muy rápido resultado.
Over 50% of the center's 20,000 clients have been women, and these results-driven programs have proved two things: that inclusive development policies yield economic success, and that country ownership equips nations with the tools to progress.
So the country ownership of projects is really important in the delivery thereof. There may be sort of a global design because we want to share best practice and not reinvent everything. But in fact, the country needs to deliver it because it's only on the ground that things happen.
In 2011, the largest ever number of countries came together for a development meeting in Busan to forge the Global Partnership for Effective Development. They agreed on 4 guiding principles: transparency, results, country ownership, and inclusivity. These and other important instruments can ensure countries can take ownership of their own development and improve the lives of all their citizens. But first, we have to make our global partnership into a functioning reality. Today, we have the chance to build on our proud history and turn the global partnership into a real force for change and a beacon of hope for billions of people. It's time for change.
Okay. All right. Good morning. Could you take your seats, please, so we can begin? Can you take your seats, please, now? Right now. Please, everybody, if you could take your seats very, very quickly and fall silent so that we may begin. We're already a little bit behind time, so we would like to make it up. I can see some delegates coming in, so I'm going to give them just a few seconds. Delegates, could you please take your seats as soon as you come through the door, as quickly as possible. All right. Good morning, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I am Zainab Badawi, and I am the moderator for this opening plenary session of this first high-level meeting, which is taking place to discuss the progress made since Busan 2 years ago on the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation. I'm sure that all of us who've come from near and far would like to thank and commend the authorities here in Mexico for the smooth running operation of the conference so far. I'd also like to acknowledge the gratitude of the organisers for the 3 co-chairs of the Global Partnership for Effective Development and Cooperation: the Secretary of State in the United Kingdom for International Development, Justine Greening, also Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, the Finance Minister of Nigeria, and also the Minister of State for National Development Planning of Indonesia, Armida Alisa Jabana. So they are the 3 co-chairs of this Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation. Now, I'm sure that a lot of you were in Busan when those discussions took place. I wasn't, but I was at one of the previous meetings in Accra, and as somebody like all of you who's been involved in the development field one way or another, I think we all breathed a heavy sigh of relief when we saw that the word aid had been banished from the lexicon, and that we now talk about effective development cooperation and building the global partnership. And you know, in the development field, we've had so much, haven't we? We've had the Washington Consensus, the post-Washington Consensus, the Beijing Consensus. Well, now we have the Busan approach. And what is different about the Busan approach? It's a marvelous idea. You kind of think to yourself, why wasn't this done sooner? Because what it does is it talks about inclusive development. And, you know, I was born in the Sudan, and we have a lot of pyramids in the Sudan, more than 200. So I like pyramids. And I think the Busan approach inverts the pyramid, so it's upside down. And you have that big, wide space at the top. So the Busan approach brings all the stakeholders who normally languish at the bottom you bring them to the top. You bring in the civil society organizations, the parliamentarians, the politicians, private sector, philanthropy organizations, and so on, and you say all of you must be involved in what we now call inclusive development. And so what we want to achieve in these 2 days of this high-level meeting is really to build on the promise, again, P for pyramid, but also the 4 Ps, I say. We want to build on the promise of what was agreed in Busan. We don't want to agree new pledges, we just want to build on what was agreed. We also want to monitor progress, another P, to see how things have gone. Also to learn, to talk and learn and listen about the implementation of these principles, because it mustn't just be a talking shop and just agreeing fine principles. We want to make sure that they are implemented. So these principles have got to actually be seen to be working on the ground. And then the other P is to see how they contribute to the post-2015 development agenda. So all those Ps are very, very important. And what we're going to have this morning in this opening plenary session is we're going to have 2 panels. The first panel will look at those principles that were set out in that video, which is looking at development partnerships, just how they work in practice, and also this issue of country ownership, which is very, very important also. Then we're going to look at another principle that emerged from Busan, which is the New Deal, looking at how we can bring inclusive development in fragile states.
We are working with various different developments, where one is a skill development program that we're running in Bangladesh, and that we're doing together with the Swedish International Development Agency, SIDA. We clearly see also that if workers don't have an ability to negotiate labor rights, that creates an unstable and an unpredictable market, which is of course very bad for us as a business, but it's also bad for the country who loses opportunities. So in Cambodia, we have started the first collaboration of its kind, we believe, between a multinational. We have also involved the Swedish trade union, IF Metall. ILO is involved, as well as SIDA. And here we are collaborating for functional industrial relations to make sure that the workers' voices are heard in the right forums. We're working for peaceful conflict resolutions, as well as increasing collective bargaining agreements. And finally, we're also collaborating a lot with like-minded brands, where we are joining forces towards government and put forward our views about annual wage revisions, enforced labor legislation, and protection of freedom of association. So yes, we believe that partnership for development is positive, possible, and necessary.
Thank you very much indeed, Anna. So we've heard there from our panel about country ownership and also inclusive, the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation. We've got a few minutes to just throw this open now to the floor, but first of all I'd like to invite a respondent from the floor, the Deputy Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Deputy Prime Minister Mekonnen. There you are, yeah. If you could make your intervention, please, put your microphone on. Yeah, thank you. Can you speak into the microphone? Is it on? Talk right into it.
Thank you, Madam. First, I would like to thank the contributors, the panelists who contribute for the high-level meeting. Regarding development.
It is true that, let me start again. Thank you, Madam. First, I would like to thank the panelists who contribute and share their experience to this high-level gatherings. Regarding inclusive development, I think for sustainable development and to address the global challenge, inclusive development is very critical. I agree with that. When you say inclusive development, the country ownership is pivotal and fundamental. Within the country, all the players should play their proper role, like the government, the private sector, the civil society, and the development partners. When you look at this in Ethiopia context, all the players are playing their proper role to sustain our development and to alleviate poverty. To realize this strong and committed government is very crucial by stating a clear development strategy and making a conducive environment to all actors, for the civil society, for the private sectors and other partners. Due to this, in Ethiopia today, we are entering to a new chapter by registering a double-digit growth for the last 10 years, and still we are fighting our best to sustain this double-digit growth development, thanks to the private sector, the civil society, and the development partners. With the government, things are moving in a very smooth and promising way. To sustain this, as you mentioned and the panelists said, the private sector engagements and civil society engagement is the engine of everything. In this regard, their role must be increased and sustainable growth must be attained. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And Ethiopia, of course, has chosen a very different path from, say, Kenya when it comes to this discussion, because as you say, the state in Ethiopia has a much stronger role to play than in the private sector than, say, it does in Kenya. We also have the Finance Minister of Nepal. I think you're going to be making a statement as well, Ram Shara Mahat. If you would make your intervention briefly, please. Having trouble with the microphone. Danny lent him yours, maybe yours as well.
Mine's not. Oh. Thank you. We have been talking about inclusiveness this morning. When we are talking of inclusiveness, from my perspective, from the perspective of my country, it is the inclusiveness to represent the various ethnic groups, ethnic inclusiveness. Our country is very diverse in terms of geography, in terms of human side, human diversity as well as geographical diversity. So unless and until you bring all the diverse ethnic groups into the economic and political mainstream, development model cannot succeed. So in order to make the development model sustainable, we are trying to include all ethnic groups to represent in the development process and at the same time in parliament. In Nepal's parliament is unique in the sense it provides representation to all ethnic groups and women in particular. 1/3, the constitution is committed to ensure 1/3 of the seats to women. At the moment we have 30% women representatives in the parliament. Similarly, we have representations from all ethnic groups in Nepal and they are represented in parliament.
Thank you.
And when inclusiveness also means, as previous speaker said, civil society, private sector, of course, but there are cooperatives, there are local bodies, and at the same time microcredit institutions. All these things will have to be brought under the umbrella of,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Very, very important point you raised there, Minister, about the need to include all ethnic groups and countries in this inclusive development agenda. If you just hand the microphone to Danny Sriskandararajan from Civicus, Secretary General of Civicus, which of course is a big umbrella organisation for civil society groups based in Johannesburg. Danny, do give us your brief intervention.
Thank you, Zainab. In the spirit of global partnership and to sort of underline the fact that civil society is an important and rightful partner in development, Civicus is delighted to announce the launch of a new initiative today as part of the high-level meeting. And it's called the Big Development Data Shift. So the website should have gone live in the last few minutes, and if you go to www.thedatashift.org, you'll see details of what we think is an ambitious tangible and potentially very transformative initiative. There's been a lot of talk about the data revolution in the last few years in development. But our worry is that the very people who should be at the heart of this revolution are being left out. Citizens should be empowered to use new technologies, to create information and data, not just to monitor progress, but to hold power holders to account. And so the Big Development Data Shift is a 2-year program that will invest in the capacity of civil society to use these new technologies, to invest in comparability so that in the next few years, perhaps with the post-SDG framework, we can actually use citizen-generated data to develop new monitoring mechanisms and not just rely on outdated official data, and of course have a whole new set of campaigning tools to build accountability. So www.thedatashift.org. I've got a sticker for you that I'm going to give to you afterwards.
I'm full of presents today, aren't I? Aren't I the lucky one? Danny, as always, good friend of mine. Thanks very much indeed, Danny, and I'm sure that delegates here will have a look. We're going to have to leave our first panel there. We've got to leave it there because of time. I mean, if there's anybody who's burning to make a quick comment from some of the interventions that were raised from the floor, you, Raj, anybody else? Helen, very briefly, if you would, just 30 seconds.
Yeah, I'll be very, very brief. I just want to highlight something the Deputy Prime Minister said that I think is the central reason why we all need to rethink the way we work together. And that is that development has changed so much that we now all need to appreciate that private investment and private enterprise are the engines of growth, job creation, and development. And to harness that engine for the purpose of social justice, ending extreme poverty, including and protecting those who are vulnerable, we need civil society, we need businesses that think about sustainability, we need development partners like there was a reference to Swedish CETA that are doing things differently. And so I just want to note that on behalf of the United States, we've been very focused on that shift to public-private partnerships, and this commitment to the global partnership is a big part of helping all of us do that over the course of the next years.
Thank you. Helen Clark.
Inclusive growth obviously requires the poorest and the most marginalised communities to get the benefits of a country's development. But inclusiveness also means that the voices of these communities have to be heard. They have to be involved in the monitoring, the feedback. I very much welcome the Civicus initiative on data shift, and I really hope it will help empower civil society around the world to be playing that role of holding all of us to account.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed, panel. Stay sitting for a moment. I'll let you get down, because while we've been talking, very quietly, the Foreign Minister of Sierra Leone, Samura Kamara, has taken the stage. And Minister Kamara, you're going to be highlighting for us just how important it is when we're talking about fragile states, recovering from conflict, or those even in the throes of conflict, how we can apply the Busan New Deal that was agreed, to see how that would all work in practice. And I should just say that the Foreign Minister has an excellent pedigree. You were also former governor of the Central Bank of Sierra Leone. You also had a stint as finance minister, but I think since 2012 you've been a foreign minister, is that right? Last year?
Yeah, I moved on into foreign territory.
You've moved to foreign territory. But you're on good friendly territory here with all these lovely friendly delegates. Sir, please give us your spotlight talk on fragile states. Thank you.
Thank you, Zainab. In the spotlight talk, I'm going to address 3 aspects. The first one is Sierra Leone's remarkable transition from emergency and humanitarian operations and assistance onto the more hardcore developmental issues. And after that, I will spend some time on how Sierra Leone has moved forward with the New Deal, being part of the New Deal from the beginning. And then I might want to share some thoughts on moving forward the New Deal. What type of partnerships, what areas can we break new grounds if we want a New Deal to go forward? But first, I bring you greetings from Sierra Leone, from the President Nkrumah, and I want to thank all the organizers for inviting Sierra Leone to participate. I must admit, at the outset that despite the significant strides we have made so far in 20 years of post-conflict peace and state building, and despite Sierra Leone being recently acclaimed by United Nations Security Council a model post-conflict country, the perceived root causes and the grisly consequences of a war that ravaged a once peaceful nation still sear deep in our memories. Still, the large number of unemployed, uneducated youth, agenda folk urging for greater recognition in state governance, pervasive poverty, public and private sector-driven corrupt practices, unfair and unaffordable justice, and transnational criminal threats. All of these do leave Sierra Leone still a highly vulnerable country and therefore provide a room for unrest. Unless these are comprehensively and sustainably addressed through a determined collective internal and international effort, we stand the risk of reversing the good gains we have made in the past 20 years. Indeed, these challenges have also been identified and stressed by United Nations Security Council as it considered the recent closure of the last United Nations Peace Operations Mandate in Sierra Leone, UNIPSIL. The closure of the United Nations Peace Building Office in Sierra Leone, UNIPSIL, and the transition by United Nations to a more development-focused mandate marked a remarkable achievement for a country that's received about the largest peacekeeping operations at the time to one that is now contributing peacekeepers to other countries in conflict. As most of us here are present, as I've mentioned, our war lasted for 10 years and we suffered quite a lot. But today, we have made certain achievements in the three major goals. First, in post-conflict recovery. And second, in our democratic transition. And then thirdly, in peace consolidation. Each phase had its own peculiar circumstances of the period and therefore necessitated clear, defined interventions in terms of our strategic planning, implementation, and financing. Of course, as always, in post-conflict construction, you began with disarmament, demobilization, and of course, reintegration. And then you follow these with the re-establishment of state authority and some aspects of rehabilitation and economic recovery. And then, where the ground rules, the foundations have been properly laid, you move on straight into hardcore development challenges. These efforts we have were met within the context of the three major strategic poverty reduction plans in Sierra Leone. We had first a PRSP1, the Poverty Reduction and Strategy Paper 1, through which we obtained debt relief and also much focused international attention on Sierra Leone. And then we moved on to the Agenda for Change, which again was incremental, which started looking at governance issues, both economic issues, economic reconstruction, as well as political and social issues. And now we move on into the Agenda for Prosperity, where we're focusing on incremental aspects of the Agenda for Change, while bringing in the new, innovative, inclusive, and people-centered interventions, including social protection, women, youth unemployment, the management of natural resources, and economic diversification. Now, during all of this, what were the underpinning institutions that we established? First, we did the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Then we had a special court for Sierra Leone, which again, historically, has ended peacefully for the very first time. Then we had an independent National Elections Commission. We had a political parties registration commission that encouraged political dialogue. We have a Human Resources Council today. Sierra Leone is the Human Rights Commission in Geneva. Then, of course, we brought in local governments and decentralization to make sure that development aspects are inclusive, because the government was heavily centralized. Then Anti-Corruption Commission has been strengthened. And then, of course, we now have an independent national broadcaster, one of the first in the developing world, which is not controlled by the government. We also had institutions for promoting transparency, accountability, public financial management, and better service delivery. Then we'll move on to building institutions for promoting democracy and participatory governance. Now, what are some of the landmarks, achievements? We have held 3 successive democratic elections alongside local government elections. Sierra Leone today is one of the fastest growing economies at a double digit, and we're sustainable there. We've attracted very huge private foreign investment flows, especially in mining, telecoms, and agriculture. We have a free healthcare initiative for pregnant and lactating women and children under 5, which has actually significantly reduced mortality rates in these categories of persons. Higher enrollment in education, including girls, where we have a good network of social safety nets. We have broadened and deepened political awareness and engagement across the country. We have achieved high recognition in international assessments and rankings, including progress in democracy, doing business, transparency, and human development. We have exited the United Nations Security Council agenda as an object for consideration, and this is a very big achievement. We've provided international peacekeepers, as I did mention earlier, in conflict countries. We're in the Sudan, we're in Darfur, and now Sierra Leone has been requested to provide 1,000 troops to Central African Republic. And of course, we have been supported by a wide range of bilateral and multilateral partnerships. The United Nations had 15 peace operations mandates, and today it has transformed itself to a development mandate, where we now have a resident coordinator and a country system model. We've got a lot of support from the IMF, the World Bank, the Arab Funding Agency, Islamic Development Bank, Kuwait Fund, Badia, etc., ECOWAS. We've also had a lot of support from bilateral countries like Nigeria, South Africa, and so many other countries. The United Kingdom, China, Japan, South Korea, South Africa, Germany, US, India have all provided Sierra Leone with support. We still have remaining challenges, as I hear in the audience: inclusive growth, what it all means. We still have to make ourselves more participatory, accountable, and transparent. We still have to promote SME growth, which is the grassroots of development. We still have strong poverty windows in the country. Social protection is therefore important. We have challenge for social cohesion, gender empowerment and employment, and of course fighting corruption. With a New Deal, Sierra Leone, as I mentioned earlier, was active in the development of the New Deal since the inception of the G7 in Dili, East Timor. As a founding member of the G7+, Sierra Leone has worked with other member countries and the key stakeholders in developing the New Deal. Sierra Leone has chaired the working group on planning and hosted the planning process meeting the New Deal. We are the first country to undertake the fragility assessment immediately after the New Deal was endorsed in Busan. Results show that we are in the middle of the fragility spectrum, 3 out of 5. We will be updating the fragility assessment this year. We ensure that the recommendations of the fragility assessment are incorporated into our national development plan. We have developed a mutual accountability framework, which is our compact within the New Deal framework. We have developed our national peace building and state building indicators, which we will be piloting this year. And we'll be hosting the 4th high-level international dialogue on peace building and sustainable goals. My perceptions about where do we go next? I do believe today that many countries or regions were promoting what we call the post-2015 agenda. The United Nations is promoting sustainable development goals. The African Union is promoting Vision 2023. We have a post-2015 agenda. Every region, every country is now promoting post-2015 development agenda. I do think, yes, we have the New Deal, we have the PSGs. Our challenge is to ensure that the PSGs are aligned into these new global development agendas. Perhaps we have not been addressing this PSG as PSGs. We've only been saying peace building and state building goals. We should now be saying SDGs and PSGs. Regional dimensions. I think much of what we do in the New Deal focuses on the national aspects. I think we also should be looking at regional dimensions so that we'll be able to move forward. I know there are areas where we can break grounds. This morning I listened to a colleague who was talking about the Arab Spring countries, although he said the Arab events. I think these are areas where the New Deal can break grounds. We have countries that are still in conflict in Africa. I'm not sure they have actually integrated their post-conflict reconstruction by bringing in the New Deal. So I think we have a responsibility. Partnerships have been developed, and everybody now believes that without partnership, the world cannot be developed faster. I want to stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Foreign Minister. Thank you. Minister Kamara there setting out the importance of fragile states and those sadly in the throes of conflict, as we see in our continent so tragically with the Central African Republic, as you mentioned, South Sudan, Mali, and a few others. And I'm sure that we all wish the people of those countries a better future that they deserve, and certainly for yours too. Thank you very much indeed, Minister. And thank you to you also, panel. Thank you very much indeed. We're now going to be moving on, thank you, to our next panel. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. The floor is that way. So now we're going to move on to our second panel, which touches on the other principles that we raised, thank you, earlier on, which is looking at transparency, accountability, and also results. And could I ask my second panel to come up, and while they're making themselves comfortable, we're going to show you a short little movie about just why these principles are so important. Thank you.
Partnership is enabling development stakeholders to focus on effectiveness and cooperation. The 10 indicators of progress agreed at Busan will be viewed through 4 principles, the second 2 of which are results focus and transparency. The purpose of the principles is clear. There is evidence that they work. They improve outcomes, they increase efficiency, and ensure every peso, rupee, or yuan is spent efficiently.
Results are important because everything we do should improve the lives of somebody in a sustainable way. And lasting change for people is what we're about. And if we forget that, we're not doing our job.
But a focus on results is just one part of the GPEDC equation. Transparency is about sharing information. It allows effective planning. It means we can learn from what we do, and it builds trust.
Where we think transparency is important is that it opens up government. It makes government and citizens much more related to each other. And then I think what you have then is a much more healthy and responsive society.
It is not always straightforward to link the benefits of transparency to outcomes and results. But in 2013, we came some way towards understanding how inextricably linked they are. When the typhoon came, Tacloban in the Philippines was a busy, bustling port. But what happened changed everything. There was chaos across the country, with over 6,000 people dead and many more suffering, hungry, and homeless.
So I'm going to try and locate him now.
The humanitarian effort started straight away. Food, shelter, water, medicine, even big ships full of supplies. It was vital the aid could be coordinated. Memories of Haiti's earthquake were still fresh. In Haiti in 2010, the aid was uncoordinated and opaque. There was no clarity in planning, and many development attempts failed, wasting valuable resources. Less than 10% of the aid was channeled through Haitian organizations. In the Philippines, it was clear that the islands needed to be the architects of their own recovery.
Developing any response and approach with those who will be effective is critical, ensuring that they will take it forward and they are invested in whatever the outcomes is that you're trying to achieve.
The Philippines could only take control of the recovery if there was aid transparency. But when they reached out to IATI, the data was not there. Not enough donors were publishing their support.
So what happened in the Philippines is your absolute proof that there are recipient countries who want that information. And when the Philippines government tried to find information on what money was coming in, they found it very difficult.
Undeterred, in just 10 days, a new country-specific transparency hub was created, FAITH. With FAITH, in the chaos following Haiyan, less aid was wasted. Fewer measures were duplicated, more lives were saved because of effective coordination. And piece by piece, Filipinos are using that support in the rebuilding of their country. The President of the Philippines said, ultimately, FAITH is more than a hub of information. It is an expression of appreciation for the kindness of those who stand in solidarity with our countrymen. And it is a continuation of our promise to the Filipino people. We are here only to serve you. Transparency and results focus work, but we need to step up to the mark.
The aid agencies need to set that example, and they made this promise in Busan. They said that they would publish all their information to IATI by the end of 2015. The clock is ticking. 2015 is very soon. If they don't act now, they won't meet that deadline. And if they don't meet that deadline, it will be harder to persuade anybody else to be transparent.
But now there is a new tool which could help take transparency to the next level and make those who don't publish accountable. D-Portal is a new, customizable open-source development tracker aimed at ministries, parliamentarians, and civil society who can use it to track where resources come from and go to. Underpinned by principles of improving transparency to achieve results, it will be invaluable for effective future planning, exposing gaps in development provision, and highlighting unequal distribution. It is hoped that making this data available for all, from citizen to chairman to chancellor, will put transparency and results, the keys to effectiveness and efficiency, in the hands of the global population. Since 2003, when Ethiopia instituted its healthcare extension program, remarkable changes have been made. Malaria deaths have halved, HIV treatment has shot up, and there has been a year-on-year increase in the number of fully vaccinated children, results that Ethiopia can be rightly proud of.
Measuring results is an essential component of the cause and effect. So the cause is the money, and then the effect is the program and what you do as a result of it.
Pharmaceuticals company GlaxoSmithKline, or GSK, wanted to invest profits back into the community.
The 20% is actually a very exciting program for most of us in the commercial world, because it's something where we are appreciating what the company has done to give back to the community.
By working in partnership with the government and African NGO AMREF, GSK helped fund the training of more healthcare extension workers, and by focusing on this as an outcome, provided real results.
Before AMREF came to South Omo, more than 70% of the mothers deliver at home without any assistance. But after AMREF's intervention, 2 years AMREF intervention, this has reduced to 50%, and only half of the mothers are delivering at home. So we reduce the maternal mortality and also the neonatal mortality because of these interventions.
By reinvesting their profits in that and then strengthening the infrastructure within the country, there's obviously long-term benefit for GSK, but equally the country benefits as a result of the growth and strength of infrastructure. It's not just about training the health workers, it's about ensuring there's an infrastructure in place, so beyond the life of the project, more health extension workers can be trained.
By following the principles established by the GPEDC, every naira, dollar, yuan, pound, and peso can be used more efficiently to stimulate yet more effective development. Results and transparency are two principles we must strive for, and leading by example, pave the way for others. Our colleagues, compatriots, neighbors, collaborators, and cooperators can build a world which is stronger, more resilient, and plentiful.
Okay, so that reminds us why results and the effective implementation of the principles is important, and also transparency and accountability. So we have refreshed our panel, as you can see. And the first panelist I'm going to come to is you, Deputy Minister for National Planning and Economic Development in Myanmar. And Lele Ten, you are an economist by training. You've studied economics in your native Myanmar, in Yangon, and also in Singapore. And Myanmar is quite new to this global partnership for effective development cooperation, and you know that there are a lot of challenges ahead of you in your country. You want to achieve lasting results. How important is it for your government to measure and demonstrate results, and would you really be doing that if the donors weren't asking for it?
Thank you, Ms. Thank you, Ms.
Hold it close.
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Badawi. Yes, Myanmar it's making real progress in a short space of time, moving forward a modern, democratic, and developed nation. You know, since coming into office in early 2011, the current government initiated a series of far-reaching reforms, social, economic, administrative, and private sector development reforms. These results have been increased peace and mutual understanding, the pursuit of a nationwide ceasefire agreement, and substantial economic growth. We also formulated the FESR framework for economic and social. It's for this current 5 year. And also we are formulating the National Comprehensive Development Plan. It's a long-term plan. And this plan provides the overarching vision and policy framework to transform our country from a low income into a middle level income in the long run. And you know, we also improve the partnership among global development partners. For example, we held first MCDF and second MCDF, Myanmar Development Cooperation Forum in our country, and also in some area we could update it. For example, we are now established the beginning of an open source, publicly accessible aid information management system, fully aligned with the ERT standard, supported by the EU. And also, we are now trying to engage EIGI standard, something like that. However, we face some challenges like poverty, inequality, and disparity among states and divisions in our country, and so on. And you know, and now we are open up. So the people, be it in the villages of the Deltas or villages of the highland, the people of our country want to see more result. They want better quality and more accessible to health clinic and schools, and also they want better roads and electricity and so on. And you know, that's why the 60 million of people in our country are scrutinizing the government and the results and dividends that we deliver them even more intensely. And also, at present, we have a parliament, we call Luto. Yeah, the parliament plays a key role in driving the transition, process through enactment and amendment of legislation, and also real check on the power of, executive, including budget expenditure. So that's why the government has to measure and demonstrate results, because we must be able to translate all that we do into tangible results that benefits Myanmar people. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very, very quickly, Deputy Minister. We heard earlier on the Finance Minister of Nepal talk about the importance of inclusive development and getting results, accountability and transparency for all the people, especially ethnic groups. We know that your country obviously has sadly had a lot of ethnic strife in the past and even today. Very quickly, you would endorse the importance of making sure that you include all the ethnic groups in your country.
Thank you very much. We have, at present, we have 4 economic policies. One of them is inclusiveness for all. You know, inclusiveness for all the people, not, who, how can I say, whenever they reside in the remote area or urban or, rural. And also, we include, private sector, CBO, NGO, and INGO also.
Okay. Thank you very much. Andris Piebalgs, you are at the European Commission. You're the Commissioner for Development Cooperation. You're a seasoned politician, both on the European stage and also in your native Latvia. And you're also a member of the UN High-Level Panel on what happens after 2015, the Post-Millennium Development Goals agenda and what we put on it. But when you look at the European Union, so much in the past, a leader when it came to giving aid and that kind of thing. But now some people would say that the EU has slightly lost its edge, that perhaps when you're looking at results, you're really trying to demonstrate results on the ground to appease your rather burdened taxpayers in the EU, rather than what's necessarily good for the country you're operating in.
Well, I would say no difference, because it's true that taxpayers should be pleased as well, because that's they pay tax and they definitely expect the results should be delivered. But I think what is important in the European Union is that also going through this economic crisis that we went through and still going in some countries, the perception of solidarity is still very strong. And I think that's a request of results. I think it's very justifiable and it's good for me and also for our partners. I believe for EU, I would just mention 3 aspects that we are trying to respond to this agenda. One is definitely volumes. We are still giving more than half of official development aid. I definitely would like that we are doing more, and I am very much praising UK that now is on 0.7% of GNI. But I think it is important also to see it's more than half of official development aid comes from the European Union. Second, we moved our framework from inputs to results. But importantly, not any kind of results, but results that very much support country development plans, development programs. I will take extreme example. There was mentioned Mali. In Mali, we mobilized financing not only to support humanitarian aid. We mobilized money supporting elections, we mobilized money to support development work with some quick delivery, but also infrastructure projects. But most importantly, we supported government in providing social services, so state building contract. But it was not in empty space. It was based on country-sound program. And I believe this approach, trusting our partner, supporting where the most important is, and in discussing it, I think it still very much singles out us in our approach towards development cooperation.
Thank you very much indeed, Commissioner. I'll leave that intervention there. Vitalis Measure, you are Coordinator of Reality of Aid Africa. This is a Pan-African network working on poverty eradication through effective development cooperation, and you're quite a specialist in development policy analysis. We heard Danis Riskandararajan earlier on from Civicus talk about the importance of data, the data revolution and so on. As a quick point to you, how crucial is the use of data now, and also how important do you think it will be in the future?
Thank you very much. I think indeed the issue of data revolution is at the heart of Busan. And indeed for me, I think it is the fulcrum, and if it is not well addressed, then we do not have any development effectiveness cooperation. So I think at the moment there is some improvement. Indeed, there are global initiatives such as the YATI and that are trying to put some efforts in order to improve data collection and use. But I think also at the national level, there are some efforts. But I want to focus mostly on the national efforts, because I think particularly when you look at the country like Kenya that has e-promise, that there is a system through which donors or development partners can give information to government in order to be able to plan their budget appropriately and be able to program efficiently. But then efforts towards populating this system is very weak, and response by development partners indeed is very lukewarm. So in essence, I think there is the demand for data, there is the need for it in our planning, but in terms of response from the government, particularly from development partners, is very weak. And I want to highlight some of the challenges that I think are important. The first issue that I think is important indeed that we need to address going forward is how do we put in place an institutional framework that indeed can generate and use this data. And that I don't think that is only the responsibility of the global community, but the responsibility of the governments as well. Because I think there's a lot of gap there where most monitoring institutions or data gathering institutions are not fully equipped, are not fully funded, and therefore they really don't have the data to be able to plan effectively. Second issue I think that is important is the timely provision of this data. At the moment, governments are not able to plan efficiently because there's no data. And I think here is not just data about financial data, but also data with regard to how projects are being implemented on the ground and what kind of effect that is having. And we're not seeing that taking place. But for us, from civil society perspective, I think indeed the legal framework for accessing data still remains an impediment. Because I think you have a scenario where you would go to a government official asking for information, and they would ask you, on whose mandate are you seeking this information? Who are you? But yet you are a government, you are a development actor. And I think, particularly with regard to giving data, for us who participate in lobby and advocacy work, it is important for us if you want to include us in development planning, because we cannot engage with you if you do not have that data. So going forward, I think in future, data is going to be very important. But I want to look at this not just in the context of empowerment, of power, but in the context of empowerment, which I think is very crucial going forward.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Vitalis, for that. The importance of data. Kyle Peters, you are Vice President at the World Bank for Operations Policy and Country Services. You've been there since last year, but actually you've been in that department for quite a considerable time, and your role is very much one where you're responsible for the World Bank's response to make sure that the development and implementation of operational policy reforms to help bank clients achieve results is there. So just briefly outline for us some of the challenges that you're meeting in doing that, please.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here. Represent the World Bank and in collaboration with the MDBs that we've worked very closely with. As you know, my institution has been involved with this this agenda for quite some time, going all the way back to its origins in Rome. And I think we really are designing our programs around the four principles of Busan, which is country ownership, managing for development results, inclusive development partnerships, and transparency and accountability. On the results agenda, I think that you'll see that one of the big focuses of the new president of the World Bank is really to engage on development results, to shape our country programs around country development strategies and the country's own, the development results that the countries aim for. I think we've been working very hard on developing a results agenda that cascades through the institution, but is built up at the foundation from the results we support in terms of our country programs, where we have mutual results frameworks and our country assistance strategies, and where we have in each of our projects we agree on a results framework and a monitoring framework. We track these results and we bring them up to the corporate level, because as the question you asked, Mr. Pillbox, I mean, we're involved in using public monies, and it's very important when you use public monies to demonstrate that there's value for those monies and that there are results that come out of those monies. So I think that's an agenda that we've fully embraced. and that we're moving forward on. It's a difficult agenda because it's it's very hard, and the fundamental aspects of what the World Bank does, which is development, which is building capacity and strengthening institutions, is inherently a hard one to measure. But we've been working through lots of sort of evidence-based approaches to really track and measure our results and to align them with the objectives that our clients have. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And next to you is Claire Woodcraft, who's CEO of the Emirates Foundation. And this is a national foundation which particularly wants to drive the agenda of the youth in the Emirates through supporting their development. And of course, so many of these countries that we talk about have got very, very youthful populations. And you've got this idea of venture philanthropy, haven't you, in the foundation? So perhaps if you just talk a little bit about that to us, but also just tell us what you think in terms of transparency, because sometimes foundations like to support pro-democracy forces and they may want to do that below the radar, and so you don't always want that done in a very transparent way.
Thank you, Zainab. Yes, absolutely. So I think for us, we look at transparency as not just being about the what, where, and when, but also the how. So how are we deploying philanthropic capital? How can we render it effectively? How can we achieve real results? We at Emirates Foundation are founding members of the OECD Net Forward, which is a global platform for foundations that I think is particularly focused on transparency and trying to drive a discourse within the philanthropic sector about how we can be more accountable. The network has done two things since its inception. One is creating the guidelines for effective philanthropic engagement, and we have now announced today that this will be piloted here in Mexico, which is great news. But the other thing we did last year was we created a report, we built a report about foundations that have transitioned from traditional models to new models. And that exercise involved 4 global foundations, including ourselves, essentially coming clean, warts on all, and what works, but more importantly, what doesn't work. And we put together 4 case studies outlining aspects of traditional philanthropy that we felt were less impactful than this new version of venture philanthropy, which is more business-based. And essentially, the report and the case studies and our new models, so all 4 of these foundations have transitioned into a different model, was essentially a response to the failure of earlier models. And we felt it was very important to share this information, that all too often there's an aversion to being clear about what doesn't work. We're all very good at talking about achievements, but we felt it was important to explain what doesn't work. So for example, we looked at short-term grant making versus long-term investments in models such as social enterprise. We looked at the value of being focused, moving away from foundations dealing with multiple sectors. We looked at the value of bringing business acumen into the philanthropic sector and not just developmental acumen. We looked at the value of measuring outcomes and not just inputs. What is the net asset value of these social impacts that we're having? And we really tried to create new solutions to old problems, new innovative solutions, looking at different financial instruments, moving away from just grants, looking at even equity models inside social enterprises, looking at social impact bonds. So that exercise and the venture philanthropy report that has now been produced is essentially, as I said, a warts and all disclosure of what works and what doesn't. And I think for us, this is the first part of an advocacy platform, and perhaps something that's been missing in traditional discourse is that how can we share failures? How can we institutionalize the learning from failures? If you look at entrepreneurs, you may find that financiers are more willing to work with entrepreneurs that have failed than those that haven't. Some of them actually put it as a precondition. And I think if we can encourage much more disclosure within the philanthropic sector and within the broader developmental sector around not just how we can collaborate effectively and work together, but how we can learn from mistakes of the past and ensure quite simply that we don't reinvent the wheel. And I think if that's something that we can come together collaboratively to work for, we can really drive the whole discussion around greater effectiveness.
Thank you very much indeed, Claire. And the sixth member of our panel is Carles Llorens, and congratulations, because February 2014 you were made Secretary General of RUFOGA, is the Regions United Forum of Global Associations of Regions, which is basically the World Organization of Regions, and your mandate is to try to expand the membership. So Carles, when we're talking about delivering results, so often it's at the regional and even local level that they are the people who are spearheading the efforts to do so. So do you think we've got the right focus when we're talking about this whole debate?
Yes. Thank you, Madam. I think this is a very relevant question. Indeed, local and regional governments around the world are responsible for direct provision of goods and services closely linked to overall development objectives, such as education, healthcare, water and sanitation. We, local and regional governments, are also faced to daily problems of poverty and social exclusion. And with the increasing of the urbanization, a clear trend, the demands of population in front of local and regional governments will be more and more important. And if we attend the prevision, they will grow a lot. Look at this. For the first time ever, as of 2010, the majority of the world population lives in cities. And this proportion continues to grow. Related to this trend is the increasing concentration of poor population in cities, a big defeat for the local and regional authorities. But local and regional governments not only are responsible to provide essential goods and services, local and regional governments are also actors in democratic governance, being in many cases directly elected and having legislative and executive power. We provide a vehicle to canalize the wills, necessities and desires of the people. This is recognized in Busan.com document, which stresses local and regional governments a critical role. So, if it is the case, this is what we ask, and what are we offering? We ask at global level, we ask to be local and regional governments to recognize as active partners in the renewal Global Partnership for Development in the post-2015 agenda. In this regard, we welcome the inclusion of representatives of our constituency as members of the steering committee of the Global Partnership of the Effective Development Cooperation. We ask also at country level the importance of decentralization, improve local and regional governments and adequate financing. We need to be recognized and to play an effective role in development. And what we offer? Two things. At global level, active and constructive participation of our constituency in the debates leading to the definition and monitoring of the global development cooperation agendas. And at country level, we are announcing here in Mexico a voluntary initiative to develop a country roadmap enhancing the contribution of local and regional governments to implementation to the Busan commitment. This proposal of this initiative is to trigger a national dialogue and consultation process with the participation of national, subnational governments, bilateral and multilateral donors, decentralized cooperation and civil society and private sectors. This country roadmap will be a contribution of local and regional governments to make development policies more effective. We invite all to develop partners to join of this initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Carles Lorenz. So they're the comments from our panel. I'm slightly conscious of time, so I'm going to go to one intervention from the floor. The Foreign Minister of El Salvador, Jaime Alfredo Miranda Flamenco. That's a lot of name to live up to, Minister, especially the last bit, Flamenco. Please do make your brief intervention if you could. Yeah, just put it to your mouth and speak, yeah. If you wouldn't mind, we're slightly short of time. Yeah. It's not working. Could somebody hand him the microphone, please? Thank you. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to speak Spanish. So if you do not mind, please put on your headset so you may understand what I want to say. I am considering this from El Salvador's perspective. For us, transparency must be a culture. And I wanted to refer to the subject the second panel is covering, because transparency goes closely hand in hand to participation and social inclusiveness. Definitely, the first great transparency is that building public policies and building governmental plans must be done under a framework in which they contribute hand in hand with civil society. That's the best way in which transparency may be effective. Secondly, access to public information is a right of citizens. Based on this, countries and governments must have laws that allow access to public information. Our country started to change in the last 5 years to the extent public information was legislated as a right, as a duty, and as an obligation that has been legislated. Now, thirdly, accountability. Government's accountability must be an everyday practice of all ministers and entities in charge of development. Within my country, this allowed us to change the way in which we carried public management. Fourthly, and following the same framework, information and cooperation must be public for all citizens, because that is evidence of solidarity with other peoples who deserve more respect. And based on this, in El Salvador, we created an information system which is public, that is cooperation information, and this has been truly successful. Muchas gracias, de verdad. Gracias, ministro. Ahora quiero darle la palabra a la organización.
Why not now, Judith? But anyway, very quickly.
Maybe because we haven't got enough transparency. Great interventions. I wanted to set them in the context of the discussion that we're all going to be having over this next few days, which is about the next 15 years, not the last 50. And we're having it at a time where we can use the power of information and the liberating role of data to help people make better decisions and better choices about their own lives. So transparency is the supply side of that. We need transparency on all resources, not just aid, because we need to liberate all resources. But it really matters how you do it. It really matters if it's timely, if it's geocoded, and if it's forward-looking. And the reason we need to do that, the reason when the place where information becomes power is where people can actually use it. For what? The range of estimates for eradicating poverty means that between maybe 100 million or maybe over 1 billion people will be in poverty. If we don't have the transparent data, we can't make choices that will help us get to the right result.
Thank you very much indeed, Judith. And thank you.
Panel, stay sitting for a moment. I'd like to invite, though, to the stage Justine Greening, co-chair of the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation. And Justine Greening, of course, is the Secretary of State for International Development of the British government. And she's going to just give us some concluding remarks to our discussions this morning. Secretary of State, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zainab Badawi, and welcome to all the panelists, the audience, not just here in Mexico, but globally. It's been a fantastic first session to look at how we've taken the principles for development cooperation that we agreed in Busan and applied them in the couple of years since. They're certainly principles that my Department for International Development in the United Kingdom takes very seriously. We've played our role in pushing forward on transparency, inclusiveness, a focus on results, but also a clear sense that country ownership matters hugely. And we've had a chance today, this morning, to hear from many of the countries and indeed the organisations involved in development about how they've taken forward that Busan agenda. But now we're about to look at how we can go further and faster in the years ahead. And I think it's exciting that the next plenary session will actually see us open up this global partnership for effective development cooperation. So I'd like to thank Zainab for chairing so expertly this first session and wish everybody a welcome to the opening session that we're about to have in a few moments' time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Secretary of State. So we're now actually in the interesting position of we're going to have our official opening ceremony. I'm just going to check to see if we've time for any interventions from the floor. We don't have any time for that because we have some very important VIPs who are going to be coming to the stage. We have President Enrique Peña Nieto of Mexico, of course, and also the Secretary General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, and also the Secretary General of the OECD, Angel Gurria, back in his native Mexico, because of course he's a former finance minister of Mexico. So I'm sorry we couldn't go to any general interventions from the floor, but I'd like to thank all our panel for their time. Thank you very much indeed, and I think we have to clear the stage for our VIPs. I hope you will have very fruitful, energetic, stimulating conversations today and tomorrow. You've got a lot of subject matter to get through when you're really going to be putting the flesh on the bones of the Busan approach. I wish you success with all your discussions and deliberations and your networking and so on. It's been my pleasure to moderate the plenary session this morning, and I wish you all a safe journey back. But from me, Zainab Badawi, thank you. Goodbye.